and then it's going to be 10% thereafter. So what we're going to have to do is, once we've calculated this, then we're going to have to calculate, okay, from that point forward, what is the new balance for the remaining term? Does that make sense? Because this is the payment that we're making for the first 12 months. After that 12 months is up, we're going to have a new payment amount for the remaining 29 years. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Okay, so here's what's happening. What we're going to do, and I can go ahead and, we're just going to kind of continue on down here. We're going to do 1, input, 12, shift, amortize, equal, 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 and we're going to get a balance for that loan at the end of that first year. Okay, I'm just going to make sure I'm putting it in all correct. All right, I get a balance of $97,542.12. Do I match with that? Okay, that's after the 2% is put in as the interest rate. And we have 369.62. So that's our new balance at the end of 1 year. Okay, everybody good? Yes, no, possibly could be. Okay, now here is the absolute mission critical thing you have to understand and realize about adjustable rate mortgages. You've got to hear me on this. Do not hear me on this, okay? You may want to write this down. Every time the interest rate changes on an adjustable rate mortgage, you will then treat it as if it is a new mortgage for the remaining term. Okay? So here's what that means. In this particular instance, for this problem, what that means is you're literally going to start over with 12 payments per year. And our new loan amount is going to be the $97,542.12. Okay? Because the interest rate has changed. The interest rate was 2% for the first year, now it is 10%. So 10% becomes our new interest rate. Now, what is our new term? Our term was 30 years. We have paid off 1 year. That means we have 29 years remaining. So our new monthly payment is going to be $860.79 rounded. Okay? And so that will now be our payment from that point forward for the remaining 29 years, unless, once again, it changes again in terms of the interest rate. Does that make sense, everybody? Conceptually, yes or no? Okay? So if we were to change the interest rate again, what would we have to do? We would have to find out what the balance is at the end of that term, start over again. Now, we'll work through another one to illustrate, but I just want to make sure you got the basic one down. Yes? Okay? All right. So, okay. I'm going to modify it up a little bit. So, let's assume that we have a $100,000 mortgage, and we're going to say year one the interest rate is 2% year 2 is going to be 4%, and year 3 through 15 is going to be 5%. All right? Now, so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have 2 different interest rate changes, okay? And so we're going to start off 12 payments per year, $100,000 loan, in this case for 15 years. Okay? And our initial interest rate is going to be 2%. We're going to calculate our payment for that. Okay? So far, pretty straightforward. Okay, so we should get 643.51. Okay, all right. Now, for the first 12 months, I'm going to kind of try to shortcut this so I can fit all on one page. Okay, we get our balance at the end of that first year. So we should get 94, 225, 15. Okay. Now, what did I say? When the interest rate changes, we got to treat it as if it's a brand new problem all over again. So clear everything out, and then start with the 94,225, 15 as the new loan amount. Now, how many years? 14. Okay, and the interest rate is now 4%. Solve for the payment. We get $733.40. Okay, that's good for 1 year. So we do 1 input 12, because this is for another 12 months, but we're sort of starting as if it were a 14-year loan, so that's why we're starting with actually periods 1 through 12. Our balance on that is $89,111. Okay, right there with that. Okay, now the next piece is, again, clear that out. And then the 89,100 as our new loan amount for 13 years at 5%. Get our payment. Usually gets negative 777, 90 rounded. Okay? This is to clear everything out. Shift, clear all.
You have to start all over every time.
Yeah, because if you don't clear it out, it's going to leave some of the stuff from the previous piece. And you don't want that. You're going to treat it as if it's a brand new loan. That's the reason why you're reducing the term every time you change the interest rate. Okay? All right? So that's the first part of how you do this. Okay? We're not done with it. Now, what we've got to do is we've got to figure out what is our effective cost of borrowing on this loan. Okay? Well, your initial gut reaction is to say, all right, well, what if I just simply take and I kind of, you know, almost like do a weighted average of these? Well, to a certain extent, that's not bad thinking, because you know that the effective cost of borrowing, it's not going to be more than 5, and it's not going to be less than 2. It's going to be somewhere between those. Does that make sense? You follow what I'm saying? Okay. So what we want to be able to do is figure out, well, what is that exact, precise effective cost of borrowing, assuming that we potentially either carry out the loan or we potentially, you know, pay it off. So let's just say that we're going to carry it out for the full term. How are we going to accomplish this? Well, let me do it. The easiest way to do it is leave that up, and then I'll put it on the other board. Okay. So 12 payments per year. All right. How much is the lender dispersing? That's going to be a cash flow from the lender, okay? $100,000 negative, okay? The lender is dispersing, all right? How much are they then receiving? They're receiving from us, from the borrower, they are receiving $643.51 as a positive cash flow from the lender's perspective, from us for that amount, and they're going to receive that for 12 months. So 12 shift in sub J, which is underneath the cash flow key. Okay? So that's happening 12 times. All right? Then, for the next 12 months, they're going to receive $733.40 as the cash flow, and that's going to be for 12 months. Everybody still with me? No. Okay? All right? So once again, this is their payment for the first 12 months because of the 2% interest rate. This is their payment that they're receiving for the next 12 months because of the 4% interest rate. Then they're going to be receiving $777.90 as their cash flow for how many remaining months? Well, 13 years would be 156 months. Now, before you try to put this into the calculator, let me tell you something. There's a limitation on what your calculator can do. Okay? We're going to have to make a little adjustment, but we're going to come back to that. Does this logic make sense? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay? The final step on this, but don't put this into your calculator yet. Wait until I tell you what you got to do. Okay? But after you've done all this, you're simply going to be solving for what is the internal rate of return to the lender. Okay? Does that conceptually make sense?
Yes. Okay.
Here is the weird, quirky deal, and I don't know why this is the case unless something has changed with the calculator in the past 10, 15 years. There's a limitation on the number of consecutive cash flows that you can put into the calculator at one time. Unless something has changed, you can only put in 99 consecutive cash flows at one time. Okay? What that means is you basically, whatever this number, if the number exceeds 99, you've basically got to figure out how to split it. Okay? And so the easiest would be to take 156 divided by 2, which is 78. Okay? So you would basically take and put this in for 78 times, and then 777.90 cash flow, and then 78 times again. Why your cash flow or why your calculator has that limitation, I don't know, other than it exists, and it's just a way to get around it, okay? And so what that will allow you to then do is you should be able then to calculate your internal rate of return.
Is it conceptually is it possible to switch it to annual payments?
No.
Is that the problem?
No, you can't do that because it's not going to be the same, because your amortization is not going to be the same for annual as it would be for monthly. Okay, so once we've got all of that, then it's pretty straightforward. We just simply put it in. So 100,000 negative cash flow, 643.51, cash flow occurring 12 times, 33.40, cash flow occurring 12 times, 777.90, cash flow occurring 78 times, and 777.90, cash flow occurring 78 times. Solve for internal rate of return, and voila, did it correctly. Should get 4.443%.
Can you put 100,000 and then?
100,000 plus minus as the cash flow.
Okay. And then you started.
Then the 643.51 as the cash flow, and then 12 shift N sub J. Matter of fact, here's what I'll do. We'll switch over here for a second to the actual calculator. All right, and so we've got it set for 12 payments per year, so it's basically 100,000 plus minus cash flow 643.51 cash flow 12 shift N sub J 733.40 cash flow 12 shift N sub J 777.
It actually allows you to do 156.
Okay. Cash flow 78 and 777.
Yeah.
90 cash flow 78.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't tried to do it in several years, so they may have updated what the calculator will do. But it used to be the case that would limit you to 99. So there you go. If that's the case, then it saves you from having to go that extra little step.
Maybe the calculator does that calculation internally. That could be possible.
All I can tell you is older versions of the calculator, it would limit it to 99, and you had to do this. You see, this calculator has been around since 1987, but they have made slight modifications to it over the years, and that's probably one of the modifications that they made I just didn't pick up on. Okay, so the point is we've got our effective cost of borrowing for the lender, or our lender's yield of 4.44, which is not surprising given what we knew that the interest rate was 2% for the first year, 4% for the next year, and then 5% for thereafter. So you would expect it to obviously be fairly skewed toward the 5%. Okay, make sense? Nice warm fuzzy feeling? Okay, moving forward. All right. Now, one of the things to sort of pick up on with adjustable rate mortgages are index rates and margin rates. The index rate is kind of a base rate. The margin rate is kind of a profit rate, if you will. This is my way of sort of explaining it. We both maybe does it slightly differently, but it all makes sense here in a second. If you turn specifically to page 126, on this page, it will go through and kind of give you a variety of additional sort of verbiage as it relates to the index rate, margin rate, and a handful of other terms as it relates to adjustable rate mortgages. But let me try to give you a simple explanation for each of these. The index rate is something that the lender will sort of predetermine and they will say, we are going to base our adjustable rate mortgages off of LIBOR, the London Interbank Rate of Exchange, or we're going to base them off of the federal funds rate, or we're going to base them off of some other rate they come up with, you know, but that is going to be kind of the floor base rate. And usually it depends on kind of where they are sourcing their money from, okay, as to kind of what that base rate or index rate is going to be. On top of that index rate, there's going to be a margin rate. And the margin rate is basically that specific lender setting up what kind of percent profit or what sort of additional percent do we want to tack on to that base rate, essentially their cost of capital, to give them the profit that they want. And so you might have an index rate of 3%, and then they have a margin rate of 2%. Okay, well, that's interesting, but how does that get into the adjustable rate mortgage thing? Well, because if this margin rate is 2% and the base rate is 3%, which of those is probably going to fluctuate?
The index rate.
The index rate. That's the one they don't control, okay? They control, the local lender pretty much controls what the margin rate is, and so they can pretty much just say, whatever the base rate or the index rate is, we're just going to tack on 2% on top of that. And so whenever you add them together, okay, you get 5% as the total stated rate, okay? But if over time, maybe over the next year, the index rate goes up to 4%, you are probably going to keep that margin rate the same, meaning now the overall rate you're charging the borrower is 6%. Does that make sense? And it could go down as well, okay? Any questions on that? All right, now, one of the things that can take place with a mortgage, whenever you go and you get it, the lender will usually specify whether there will be any sort of caps or any sort of floors. Now what that means is that the lender will typically tell you, is there going to be a maximum increase that can occur from one year to the next in whatever the ending rate is, okay? In other words, the lender could say, we're going to have a 1% cap on annual increases in your overall rate, all right? And we're going to have maybe a lifetime cap of 3% in your overall rate. So if you have an annual 1% cap, then this can occur, going from one year to the next. But what if it continues to increase at 1% a year for every year thereafter? Well, that 3% lifetime cap would mean that it would basically take the 5% plus 3%, it could never go beyond 8%, would be the lifetime cap of 3%. But all of that would be stated up front in the loan documentation. Now, you know, an unscrupulous lender, you know, might say, well, there's not going to be any caps. You know, we're just going to let this thing, you know, go wherever it goes, and wherever it lands, well, you know, too bad, so sad. But usually there's going to be a cap put into place. The same sort of thing is going to be kind of on the bottom end, okay? That they're going to say we're going to have a floor, okay? That we're not going to allow it to fall below a certain percent from one year to the next. And so as a result, that's going to be precluded as well. So if you take a look specifically, okay, so they have a little discussion there about the index rate and some of the different, you know, everything from the Treasury securities to the cost of funds index or LIBOR, and then they talk about the margin, which is what I just mentioned. And then you can kind of skip down to basically the caps and the floors, and that's just simply the maximum increases or maximum reductions that you would obviously have as it relates to whatever those rates are, okay? Fairly straightforward things, yes? Okay, now, one of the other topics that they mentioned here, look at the very bottom, lockouts. Many commercial mortgages prohibit loan repayment for a specified number of years. In these cases, should a borrower wish to repay, a prepayment fee may have to be negotiated with the lender. This is something we talked about last time and we talked a little bit about today. The term lockout provision, okay, is meant that you are precluded from prepaying the loan and under ordinary circumstances. But in the event that you absolutely positively must prepay, the lender may offer an opportunity to do so, but they will usually charge a ridiculously high fee for doing so. And that fee may be called a prepayment penalty fee, and it could also be called defeasance or yield maintenance, which is basically just another way for saying we are going to get our money for the entire period that you owe it to us, even though you're not paying us over that entire period. In other words, let's say that you've got a 5-year commitment to us for this loan, and if you decide to prepay at the end of 3 years, you're still going to prepay us all that interest you're going to owe us for those remaining 2 years, even though you're prepaying early. Does that make sense? All right. Okay. All right. I think I'll get one of the little things here. Okay. One of the other topics. Here's what we're going to try to do. We're going to try to get through all the topics. We actually don't have that much more topic-wise to cover. And then we'll do the quiz for this. It will be open book, open notes at the very beginning of class next time. Okay? Now, what that means, so let's just make sure that this is clear. You're still going to have your test over the first 3 chapters at the end of class next time. And you're also going to have one more quiz embedded in there for the material we're covering next week. Okay? So you're going to have 3 different testing things you're going to be now keeping in mind that test 3 will be closed book, closed notes, but the whole idea is you're going to have this entire week to really study. So you've got an advantage to do well on this quiz if you just take the time to study. Does that make sense? Now, I'm also willing, if you want to stay here tonight, I'll stay here until midnight if we need to do the quiz tonight, if that's what you really want to do. But my suspicion is you probably prefer to put it off until next week. Okay, that's it. Moving on. Price level adjusted mortgages or plans. One of the other mortgage products that was developed in an inflationary sort of time horizon in the 1970s and the 1980s, where you had ridiculously high interest rates. I mean, it was not uncommon. I know this is hard for you to imagine, but I remember very vividly getting a certificate of deposit that, now they might give you a % or even less in some cases for those, but I remember having a couple that were 15+% for, CDs, and mortgage loans at that time got as high as 18, 21%, okay? That's hard for us to, in this day and age, to even fathom that, all right? Well, one of the products that was introduced during this really wicked sort of inflationary environment was what is referred to as a price level adjusted mortgage. Now, the reason why we're sort of talking about this, even though these really aren't used at this particular point in time, they could be reintroduced just like any other mortgage product. That's the thing that you have to sort of keep in mind. Every single one of these mortgage products, and I keep calling them products because they are. It's a product that the lender is offering to the consumer for their loans, and they create these things that try to solve some sort of risk issue or some other sort of concern the lender may have. Okay, with the price level adjusted mortgage, here's what happens. You offer the consumer potentially a relatively low base interest rate on the loan. Just follow me conceptually for a moment. But, and that, once again, pulls them in the door. Relatively low interest rate. But, what you do is each year you use some sort of an index like the Consumer Price Index, which is a proxy for the overall maybe value increase in the property over that year, and you use that index rate to inflate the underlying balance of the loan. Okay, so here's what I'm saying, in case that didn't quite sink in. You get a $100,000 loan, beginning of the year. Over the course of that year, you're making your payments on the loan with some sort of a relatively low interest rate in relative terms. And then at the end of the year, the lender says, well, the consumer price index for this past year was 5%. Okay? As a result of that consumer price index being 5%, that means that chances are your home or your property went up in value by 5%. Therefore, what we are going to do is we are going to raise your mortgage balance by 5%. So you go from having a $100,000 mortgage to now at the end of the year having a $105,000 mortgage. Does that make sense? Yes or no?
You're gonna have equity.
What, sorry?
You're gonna have equity.
Basically, yes. But the whole point, you're saying, well, how does a lender sell something like that? Because the average ordinary consumer doesn't understand what they're actually buying, okay? And they also, what are they enticed by? That lower interest rate that the lender is giving them on this loan, but yet they're taking it away from them by virtue of increasing the balance of the loan at the end of the year. Does that make sense? Yes or no?
So it's negative amortization.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so here's the way it would work. $100,000 mortgage. All right, in this case, we're going to go with a lower interest rate. So maybe we'll go with a 5% interest rate. And once again, 30 years. We get our monthly payment. It's monthly. 536.82, 12 payments per year, just to make sure clear. Okay. Now, at the end of that year, we calculate our balance. Okay, and we're saying so for year one, the index or the adjustment is 5%, and then we could, I'm not going to go through this far, but maybe the next year might be 3%, the next year might be 4%, and so forth, so on. But we're only going to be focusing on ourselves on this first year. So we go ahead and we get the balance. Our balance on the loan is $98,524.63. Okay, so all of that's normal up to that point. Then what we're saying is, all right, after the end of that first year, we're gonna charge this price level adjustment of 5%, meaning that your new mortgage balance is going to be $103,450.87. Okay, so everybody follow that logic? Yes or no? Okay. Now, what's going to then happen is, just like, if you will, with the adjustable rate mortgage, with the price level adjusted mortgage, we've got to kind of, if we're going to go to the following year, we're going to have to kind of clear everything out. And our new loan amount is going to be $103,450.87 for this 5% interest rate. And our term is going to be the remaining 29 years. And we're going to have a new payment.
Isn't it supposed to be 3% when you
No.
open year two?
No. This is the adjustment that we'll be making
Okay,
at the
that's
end of
what
the
we're
year.
gonna multiply
Yeah, I
by.
probably shouldn't have used the same rate for the interest as I did for the
Okay.
adjustment. That was my fault, just for using the same thing. Okay, so 103,450.87 5% for 29 remaining years, monthly payment jumps up to 563.66, and then you kind of repeat the process. You find the balance at the end of that year, adjust it upward by 3%, and so forth, so on. You get the idea? Okay, so what do you think about that? Wonderful deal from the lender's perspective.
Everything
Okay,
just like stopped back in the early 80s, like people tried, I mean, because it jumped pretty quickly, right? It wasn't like a gradual.
oh yeah, no, there's some crazy stuff going on. I mean, but you know, it was kind of like, once again, you know, Wild West sort of mentality. I mean, here's the thing you have to just sort of think about, and this is why, you know, finance and this aspect of you know, finance and real estate is so interesting, is you've got some really smart folks sitting around, you know, at these different time periods and thinking of these schemes, and that's a word to use, schemes / products that they will introduce into the market, because the idea behind it is, how can we, as a lender, make a whole bunch of money, and we create this new product that we somehow market, you know, to folks, that we can sell the sizzle because it sounds really good, because we're offering them a really low interest rate in relative terms, but yet we're getting it all back just by virtue of constantly increasing their balance on their loan. Okay? Make sense? It's brilliant. All right? It's one of the reasons I love to talk about this, because it's just, it begins to kind of help you to sort of see the mindset, because, I mean, the reality of it is, when you talk about loans, you know, there's only so many variables you can change. You know, you can change the interest rate, you can change the term, you can change the payment, but you know, how is that going to be changed? It's going to be changed by, you know, some variation of this, but then you can also change the mortgage balance. I mean, so it's cool stuff. All right, moving forward. Okay. Yep, that one's done. Okay. All right, assumable loans. All right. One of the types of loans that exist for not necessarily a type of loan, but an opportunity that exists for some loans that are out there in the market are assumable loans. And what this means is, you as a borrower have obtained a loan. Maybe Bridget has gone out, she's obtained a mortgage loan, and then at some point Bridget wants to sell her property to Dustin, and Dustin is saying, you know, Bridget, you got a really good interest rate whenever you bought your property, and I'm not able to get that same interest rate at this particular point in time for whatever reasons, whether maybe your credit is not as good as what hers was, or maybe interest rates have gone up dramatically since she got her loan, or you know, some other reason. And so you're saying, Bridget, you know what? That mortgage loan that you've got that's at that much lower interest rate, that's worth some money to me, that I'm willing to pay you some additional money to basically be able to assume your loan and not have to go out and get a new one. Does that make sense, conceptually? Now, there can also be other reasons. You know, this could be even like if you keep it within a family situation. You could sort of say, all right, you've got mom and dad get a mortgage loan, and then at some point, you know, within 5-10 years, then they say, all right, to the kids, we're going to turn this over to you, and you know, you start making the payments for us. You're just going to assume the mortgage or assume the payments for us from that point forward. And you know, so it may not be an overly formal transition. It could be, like I said, within a family context, and you know, the mom and dad or whoever, you know, had great credit and whatever, and then you know, they're passing it on to their kids, so their kids don't have to go through maybe all the brain damage of getting the loan on their own. Okay, make sense? Okay, so but the real question though is, if this is not necessarily between like family or close friends or whatever, you know, what is the value of that assumability? Okay, does that make sense? In other words, how much value is it if you've got a 5% interest rate, but the best that Dustin can do is 10%? That's a pretty big difference, you know, in terms of what payments that, you know, we remember back to our previous example, that 5% interest rate on that $100,000 loan was like $300 and something a month, and we know that for the 10% interest rates it'd be $877. It's like $500 a month difference. Well, how much is that worth to Dustin up front to be able to compensate Bridget for? You know, you could say, well, all right, well, you know, he could just pay her maybe, you know, something less than $500 a month for however long he, you know, has the loan. Well, yeah. Or, you know, what if Bridget wants all the money up front? Well, then, you know, you have to do some sort of a discounted analysis to find out, well, maybe what's the present value of that savings. Okay, does that make sense conceptually? All right, so let's kind of work through a fairly simple example to illustrate the concept. So once again, 9,000, 5%, 30 years, better payment. Okay, and so at 5%, I'm thinking about the 2% thing we did, but at 5% is 536.82. Okay, now at 10%, it's the 877.57. Okay, so we know that the difference between the two is 340.75. Now, just to kind of keep the math simple, just to sort of get our heads around it, that's $340.75 that he is saving for 360 months. Yes? Now, this is disturbing. Basically, he is going to save more money in interest than the actual loan amount. Okay? Because just to make sure that you're actually paying attention, if you actually take the 877.57 and you multiply it by 360, this is the part where it makes you sick as a, I'm not sure why, but sick of something. 315,925.20 is your total out-of-pocket expenditure. That's both principal and interest. Now, once again, not be rocket scientist here. How much of that is interest? Well, if your loan is $100,000, subtract out the $100,000 from that. So $215,000 of it is interest. Yikes. Okay? So my point is, getting back to this example, Dustin's going to save potentially $122,000 in cash out of pocket if he's able to assume Bridget's loan. Now that's assuming that Bridget just says, I'm a nice person, I'm going to let you assume my loan, I'm not going to charge you anything extra. Well, you know, you probably don't want to do that. You probably want to charge him some money for the opportunity of assuming that loan, okay? Because, you know, there's real value to it, okay? Does that make sense? So, now, the question is, well, how much value should we attribute to that? Because chances are, it doesn't make sense for you to write Bridget a check for $122,000. Because first of all, that's spread out over 30 years. So there's a discounted value of that, you know, today. Plus, why would you give her every dollar of the difference? Because then there's no real benefit, you know, to you. You follow what I'm saying? So you're going to have to give her something, but not the full amount. So that's where then it becomes a negotiation, really, between the two of you, you know, as to what really that might be. But on the extreme side, what you could sort of say is, all right, if we were to put in, and we could do this several different ways. Let's just take the difference of the 340 75, and we put that in as a payment amount, and over 30 years, and we say we want to discount that at 10% and find out what the present value of that is. That's going to discount it the most, okay? So 340.75 as the payment, 30 years, 10%, and get the present value. So 38,828.74. So chances are that's going to be the most that you would probably want to come out of pocket at this time, okay? Now the question is, because if you spend any more than that, it's really not economic, it doesn't really make economic sense to do so. Okay, does that make sense? So now the issue is, and then you guys have to negotiate, you sort of have to say, well, you know, I'm not going to pay you 38 grand, even though it's really worth 38 grand to you, you know, you're probably not going to be willing to pay that full amount, so it might be, you may, you know, pay her, let's say 30 grand or 20 grand or something, but that is still better than her getting nothing for it, you know, from her perspective. Because, you know, you could just say, I'm just going to sell it to you, you know, for whatever the price is, and too bad so sad on your financing, you've got to just deal with that. But see, there's another way of looking at this, and that is that she might be able to get a higher selling price for the asset simply because that financing is attached to it. There's another way of looking at it, okay, than she would have been able to charge for the asset. Because that lower cost financing is in place, she might be able to up the price of the asset from, let's say, 100 grand to maybe close to 130 grand or so.
Or with the option of her essentially retaining the mortgage.
Right. Which there are all kinds of complications there. Okay, so no. I'm saying if it's assumable. Many loans are not assumable, okay? Now, in practice, what happens is a lot of loans get assumed, but you just don't know that they're being assumed. You know, it's the sort of thing, okay, you know, Bridget, I've got a mortgage, you know, it's the 5% interest rate, hey, you want to assume it? And you say, yeah, okay, so here's how we're going to do it. We're going to keep everything in my name, you're just going to make payments to me, and then once all this is sort of said and done, then I'll deed it over to you.
More commonly cost. What happens if another person, they're assuming the loan and they're keeping the note and the person dies?
There are problems. No, seriously, there are problems. I mean, you know, and that is a very real possibility that, yeah, someone dies, and then, you know, to what extent that, if that, you know, agreement's not written down, not recorded, how enforceable is it, you know, a whole number of issues that can come up, you know, that swirling around with that sort of thing.
But if you have a history of payments, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, once again, legally you can probably argue the case, but it's just, it's not going to be easy, and there's going to be definitely some, you know, issues you're going to have to deal with.
But I guess the question goes to, is that a legal, is there a document or that you follow through?
The problem is, okay, look, technically with the example I just gave,
Right.
if it's a non-assumable loan, and I've allowed her to assume it, technically I'm doing something illegal, okay? I'm not suggesting you should do it. Please don't misinterpret what I am saying, okay? But I'm saying it happens, you know, these kinds of situations happen all the time, where people will make these kind of arrangements with people, you know, for a whole number of things, and not even on just purchase of property, but on subleasing their property, like an apartment. I mean, you know, you have an apartment and maybe you have a lease for the next 12 months, and then all of a sudden you get fired or you get relocated, and instead of, you know, trying to deal with all of the other swirling issues, you just, you know, put your apartment on Craigslist and say, hey, my lease is for the next 12 months, just make payments to me and then I'll forward them on to the landlord, kind of thing. I mean, it's the same, you know, they're basically subletting or assuming, even though technically it's not probably the appropriate thing or legal thing to do. Okay, once again, not advocating it, just simply saying it happens. Okay, questions? Okay, now. All right. I think you can do all these. Okay, so bottom line, what we will do is come in next week, very first thing, the moment you walk in the door. Matter of fact, if you want to come a few minutes early, no, when I say a few minutes, like 5 minutes early, you know, you can go ahead and start the quiz, and then finish it up, and then we'll jump on into the lecture, obviously, for the next chapter. So it's actually probably going to work out just fine, because the next chapter obviously is not going to be quite as lengthy as the one we did earlier tonight. That's probably the lengthiest one in the book in terms of topic coverage, in terms of difficulty. So yeah, that shouldn't be a problem at all. And then we'll still be able to have the test the last hour and 15 minutes of the class. Okay? Any questions?
The test next week, we do the okay with this.
Yeah, if you do okay on the quizzes, you don't have to take the test. You're done after we finish that other chapter. But you know, those of you that did not do well, then you can take that test. Yeah, and what I will do is I will sit here right now and I will finish grading all the quizzes from tonight. And then so that way that you can, if you want to wait around or you want to email me, I'll give you the grade on those. But it shouldn't take me more than 5 minutes to get through those.
Another place to start, just the questions in the back of the chapter.
I mean, honestly, I don't know how many different ways I can say this. Focus on what I cover in class, okay? And the book is merely to help to give you additional explanation as to what I cover in class.
Okay, so we take about the data.
I don't know how to be more straightforward than that.
Tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
So the guy is the head of the head of the department. You know, a portion urban is the partnership between and the mile. So the guy, this is the way of one of these things. Yeah, there was no. Yeah, so the guy owns portion, if you want to put it like that. Soon tough guy. And so he's doing he said he's doing he actually said like the wall. The guy is not hiring. In other words, the guys are wall. I mean, that's you know, he asks you something, straight answer, not a lot of BS. He doesn't, he's so you know, and focus extremely on your math skills. Not on your math, your moral skills, so your math, all the mathematical.
Are they gonna test me?
No, he won't test you, but no, he just, because basically, I'm assuming there is going to be a lot of modeling. So being quick on, you know, running numbers and the answers is key, because basically how the conversation goes. In the meeting that we have with the opponents is, here is in Tomato, here is Tony Pozo, which is the financial chief guy, which is Tony Pozo, okay, one of them. Okay, this is bread, and then it's gonna be you.
All the same things.
Yeah, same. So something happens, and then you gotta be able to tell them whatever on the spot. What happened if the was changed?
Oh, you mean the little part of it?
Meaning,
That's
if they had a,
that works.
let's
I
say
think it would work.
they had
Okay,
a
Dolphins,
conversation when
I'll just be out of town
The Dolphins or the Marlins one that I said? I said the Marlins one.
have you on the speaker,
The Marlins
and the more than
or the last week of September. You won't be here? I won't be here either.
The 23rd?
Like you, sure, no.
All right, well, the president and vice president will be here then.
But you, Jason,
Unfortunately, bro, they won't.
Jason will be there.
You guys are gonna be out of town, tell me when you're in town. I mean, we can do that, the one VIP deal, we can do that for any game. Like, the beer fest was the only thing that was like on a specific date. That was the Saturday, following the 24th.
I see it until 1
But that thing, it actually kind of sounds
No,
like,
I've seen it, because I don't do the
not really, the beer fest thing, like, I don't know, is it that big a deal? Like, I don't even like beer.
7, but they have.
Beers for breakfast, yeah,
I
like,
work Saturday. Yeah,
I didn't expect that.
Well,
yeah.
he doesn't know know how to sound.
No, every Sunday, but I will see.
You guys go to college?
So
No?
I'm sure he will.
Beer, cereal?
Well, bro, I've been 4 weekends a month.
Cornflakes, no?
You guys 4 weekends a month?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
one.
One Saturday, yeah. No, yeah, they don't,
No,
they
really?
don't continue on Sunday.
Feels like you're in trouble then.
I know, bro.
That's a lot.
Okay, if you wanna see what you did, I've got them.
Forget about the hours. That's what I'm telling you, they're gonna pay well. They're gonna squeeze.
Make sure you give them back to me, I'll hand them out to you, you can look at them for a couple of seconds, and then just give them back to our face down here.
Girlfriend?
Well, that's
Oh.
for weekend time.
Actually, it's maybe easier if I just hand them out by name.
Yeah.
Right there.
Well, basically.
Where's Rosie?
I mean, here,
What do you mean?
I mean, it's,
Okay, just like right there's fine.
if it's like
Okay.
Saturday also.
So they also, they
That's
Okay, she's gone.
that's what he said.
Bridget?
But I also don't, no, it's gonna be like
Chelsea.
even more than 50 hours a week. or 55.
Dustin.
Cause you have Packer.
Jarvis.
Is it a full work on Saturday?
I
Very
don't know
Nella.
whether they have mine.
That little?
Well, I thought they were gonna be in February.
This is
Maybe
yours.
we're going,
Chanel.
but they're not gonna write a check for.
And once you're done, just put them right there, face
Because
down.
the bonus, the maximum amount is 10% of your base salary.
Okay, and then I've got Christians and Gordons.
I got it.
Oh, if they mention Saturday, I don't know, 65.
No, but that's the thing, bro. They
Okay.
know, they might know you.
Christian, Justin, Gordon, you want these?
What?
Oh, sure.
You wanna look at them real quick?
Yeah.
Okay. This,
Yeah, make sure you give them back to me.